ask, Dan, when you made the decision to do the tour of the podcast, was documenting it and making a movie always part of the plan, or did that sort of just happen organically?
When I decided to do the podcast, I thought that making a movie about it would be a way to justify it. I didn't realize until I watched the movie, and had some distance from the whole process, that the podcast tour decision was entirely very evasive, very, very like walk away from a world in which you are either a good writer or a bad writer. Go to a place where that question is off the table. And I didn't really know that's quite what I was doing. But when I called Neil about, like, we'll bring cameras along and we'll turn this into a fun thing. And I had pitched like a sort of mockumentary thing, a sort of meta kind of, I'm making fun of myself as someone who thinks they deserve to have a documentary made about them. We'll do funny sketches. We'll do bits. And Neil said, nope. And I was like, I got no time to interview other people, so maybe you can make a documentary where nothing happens and it'll be good. And you know what, kid? You're all right.
Film documents your successes and failures, both personally and professionally. How did you feel about kind of putting yourself out there in that way?
That's just my comfort zone. I put myself out there as a alternative to working with myself, you know. So I felt fine about it.
Although you do work with yourself in the film. You have scenes with yourself.
Yeah, but I come away the same narcissistic pig that I always have been. Like, it's my self-reflection is like a chimpanzee using a stick to eat termites. It's just a very impressive display that's ultimately about survival.
And Neil, let me ask you, when you were shooting the film, did you know, were you sort of self-editing? Did you know, okay, well, we're going to use this, we may not use that? And did you know what the ending was going to be?
No, I mean, looking back, I took notes every day and would send emails back to the editors because they were cutting as soon as we hit the road. And looking back, it's the shape of the story does look a lot like those notes. But the weird thing is, 2/3 of the way through the tour, Dan and I were in a bar, and he turned to me and he goes, "Hey, I'm not changing, I'm not learning anything, so you don't have an ending to your movie. Like, what are you gonna do?" And I was like, oh, "You're right, I don't." And so we never knew what that was going to be. We also didn't know he'd get his job back on Community. So there's a lot of things that happened even after the tour. And as we were going along, we couldn't have known the journey Spencer was going to go on. You know, he's really the guy who has a fully circular story. So as I was doing it, no, we tried to have our eyes on the prize, I guess, but it took shape in the bay, edit bay.
Yeah. Let's talk about the phenomenon that is Spencer. I mean, did you have any idea that first night when you met him that he would become such a friend and a part of your life and a part of the story?
No, God, no. I just, you know, I'm especially proud of my friendship with Spencer because in addition to being fulfilling and just hitting the spot that a friendship hits, it's also a huge piece of evidence in the case against planning things, against making smart decisions, against waking up every morning and making a list of what you need to do and how you're going to accomplish that. Because I wouldn't have had a podcast, and I wouldn't have said, is there anybody here that's a dungeon master? I think I want to try playing Dungeons and Dragons. And Spencer wouldn't have been there because, by his own account, he had some dumb instinctive urge to go from Simi Valley to Los Angeles and see if I wanted to play D&D sometime. I'm especially happy when we have these moments where we go, it's important to not think everything through all the time, because God knows I don't want that to be have a high priority put on it, or I'll just be the worst person in the room.
Yeah, I hope the movie, I think it does. I hope it captures the truth of that moment. Like, there's a scene in the beginning of the movie where Jeff and Dan are joking about what they know about Spencer. And the reality is none of us knew anything about this guy. I think it was day 3 or 4 when we finally asked him how old he was, because none of us even knew how old this guy was. And we were just learning every day about this stranger that came on that left his job for a month and came on the bus with other strangers. It really is, phenomenon's a good word, because he went from living in his parents' house in Moore Park to, I don't know if I can give it away or whatever, to a lot of success. Yeah. Like a complete 180 in his life in less than a year.
Yeah, it's amazing. in the movie, you mentioned that you felt like Spencer became the hero of the film, and you're the villain of the film. But I would actually submit to you that it's like Star Wars: A New Hope, that he's the Luke Skywalker, the young innocent who goes on this journey, and you're more like Han Solo, the rugged guy who's willing to shoot Greedo, first.
That could be. Or I also thought about, there are two words for characters that don't change in a hero's journey. They're the villain, or they're maybe a mentor. I can't call myself Obi-Wan Kenobi in an interview, but I think Obi-Wan in a lot of ways, by virtue of his being old and having been through a movie we haven't seen yet, he is a Han Solo figure. We just don't see it that way when you meet these old grizzled wizards. What you don't see past the beard and the pot belly and the wise old carefully chosen words is that at one point that guy was shooting Greedo, and he was also kissing Princess Leia and finding out she was his sister, and they've been all over the place, and they're kind of bored, and they're kind of like the most they can offer you is an old sword from a Foot Locker, and a lot of warnings about how things are going to suck, but it could also be good. So that really woke me up. Villain is that guy, plus he takes it out on people. He goes like, okay, I'm going to look through a crystal ball, and what's Aladdin up to? Send the monkeys. I haven't seen the movie. But the Obi-Wan guy, it's like, oh, that's a role to rise to, the Dumbledore, the Pat Sajak, Alfred. Yeah, sure. Like being there as a support system and saying, it takes some growing up if you're going to do that, because you have to stop being in business for yourself, ego-wise. You have to, not ego-wise. You can be the biggest egomaniac in the world. You have to stop being in business for yourself, outcome-wise. You have to be like, my ship has sailed, and that can be a pretty unfulfilling thing to say for if you're 25. It's like, I don't want to be out of the game. But it's also like, hey, do you want to sit around and eat McDonald's and not change? Then be a mentor.
Can you talk a little bit about that sort of podcast movement that's happening?
I think it's the same as everything else. It's punk rock. Not to make a presumptuous analogy, but I'm just saying, like in any art form, we always keep moving in that direction. As soon as there is a tried and true format, there is stagnation. As soon as there are so many people in that workforce that some of them are broke, there is innovation. As soon as there's innovation, there is charisma. As soon as there's charisma, there's money, and the cycle continues. So it really is just movement westward. I think that there's another element to that that's not just, oh, that's how humans work. We're like little ants that move in certain directions. It's that along the way, you find out that Marc Maron, this is his calling. This is what he's actually good at. He lived his whole life in a completely different world than the one he knew he was actually going to make his big mark in. Go back and talk to 35-year-old Marc Maron in the green room of some comedy club and like ask him, his opinion about like this future Marc Maron that exists. I think that's really fascinating to me. He turned out to be, he hates the phrase the Barbara Walters of comedians, but he's a curator. He's an archivist. He has this kind of mentor-like role, in a strange way. He's younger than 25 again because of this new functionality.
And the same has happened to you. In the film you mentioned at one point you wish that you could just do this and not be worried about turning in scripts to Fox and CBS and also some of the other things. Is that something that you would like to continue to do more, or will that always be sort of your day job and this is your...
Yeah, I was born in Wisconsin, so I don't think there's enough time in this world for me to become comfortable with the idea of I should be paid to perform. I think I should be paid to write, and I should charge top dollar for it as long as people want to read it or shoot it. I don't think I'll ever round the bend of like, I'm a personality, give me $5 for it. The funny thing is that we're actually going to start doing that on my website. Start charging a subscription fee for video feed of the podcast, but that's to pay for the servers. I think that Kevin Smith evolving into that world is suitable for him. As a Kevin Smith fan, I'd be like, yes, you are an actor. You were in your first movie. I was never really that guy. I think that almost what's for sale with me as this meat pile is that it's not for sale. That sounds almost pretentious, but if you thought that I was trying to be famous, you would very quickly be like, why would you be famous? You look like my dad's friend from work.
Well, last thing I'd ask for both of you guys, sort of your surprise at the connection that you had with the fans across the country.
That's the really enthralling thing. It's like, holy cow, by being selfish, I'm actually doing the technical definition of altruism. Because you see these people talking to each other after the show and going like, oh, you came up on stage and you talked about your nylon fetish or your Asperger's. And, I had an uncle who did this, and it's like, holy cow. Just these people, when they hug you and their bodies are shaking because they're like, whether you deserve it or not, whether you did anything to make it happen, you were an opportunity for them to grow and to express themselves, and that's pretty awesome.
How did you feel like seeing that impact that Dan had?
That was like from the first shows I went to. That was the light bulb. Like, this is why this is different. This is why this is unique. And we were on the road. We interviewed 130 or 40 of these kids and said, look right in the lens and tell us why you're here. Like, not in a negative or positive way, but what brings you here? Why is this special? And they would always talk about how they appreciate the honesty. They would all say, we feel safe in that room. We've been put down and we've been kicked around a lot of our lives. And a lot of these kids, there's a texture to them. There's a reality to what they've seen and been through. And they would say, and we can come in this room and we can talk about it, and no one's going to make fun of us or put us down. And that was really the backbone of why I felt this was worth doing and why it should be made. So it was very important.
Yeah, well, it was a great documentary.
Thank
great
you.
Seeing the show live on the film, and great talking to you guys.
Thank you.
All right, great. Stay rogue.
We will.